Dear Lord, thank you for bringing together this beautiful family of storytellers and story lovers from across the world. Bless each person reading this, whether they're joining us from the busy streets of New York, the rolling hills of England, the sunny shores of the Caribbean, the diverse cities of Europe, or the vast landscapes of Australia. May our stories continue to bridge distances and connect hearts. Grant us understanding and kindness in our interactions. When words hurt, give us strength to respond with love. Bless each member of this family with peace, joy, and the warmth of belonging. Thank you for the gift of storytelling that brings us together. Let our time here be filled with imagination, friendship, and respect for one another. Amen. The Global Family Game. Let's play a fun game to see where our story-loving members are from. I want to know more about you. Here's how we'll play. Tell us which region you're from. Write your heart below. USA. Write a bald eagle. UK. Write a lion. West Indies. Write a Dr. Bird, hummingbird for Jamaica. Scarlet ibis for Trinidad and Tobago. Europe. Write a various. Bull for Spain, Gallic rooster for France, golden eagle for Germany. Australia, write a red kangaroo for extra fun. Share what you love most about your country. And while you're here, I'd love to hear, did you enjoy our last story? What kind of stories would you like to hear next? Remember, even when some comments might hurt, I still love each one of you. Your presence here makes this family complete. If you're happy with our stories, just write, "We are satisfied," with a heart. Let's begin our story with all this love in our hearts. Are you ready for today's tale? Manhattan glittered like scattered diamonds against the velvet night sky. Rain pelted against the floor-to-ceiling windows of Eclipse, the exclusive rooftop bar perched 50 stories above the city's pulsing heart. Taraji Henson stood at the bar, her fingertips tracing the rim of her third, or was it fourth, martini glass. The olive bobbed gently in the clear liquid, much like her thoughts swimming in a sea of champagne and victory. She'd done it. After 3 months of sleepless nights, endless presentations, and fighting tooth and nail against every doubt and prejudice, she'd landed the Richardson account. $50 million. The biggest deal in Stellar Marketing's history, closed by the youngest creative director they'd ever appointed. The bartender, Andre, slid another martini her way. Celebrating something special, Miss Henson. Taraji's crimson lips curved into a smile that could light up Times Square. You could say that. She lifted the glass, watching the city lights refract through the crystal. Her designer dress, a black Versace number that hugged every curve, caught the warm glow of the bar's ambient lighting. She'd chosen it carefully this morning, armor for battle. Now it was a gown for victory. Thunder rolled across the sky, and lightning illuminated the rain-streaked windows. The storm matched her mood, powerful, electric, unstoppable. The deal would transform her department, potentially the entire company. Not bad for a girl who'd grown up in a small apartment in Brooklyn, watching her single father work 3 jobs to keep her in good schools. The alcohol buzzed pleasantly through her veins, making the world soft around the edges. The bar's other patrons, Manhattan's elite, all old money and older names, faded into a comfortable blur of expensive perfume and quiet conversation. This was her moment, and nothing could touch her. Until something did. A hand, warm and steady, caught her elbow as she swayed slightly. Miss Henson. That voice, deep as aged whiskey, smooth as silk, and carrying enough authority to make her spine straighten automatically. Carson Boyd, her CEO, the man whose presence filled every room he entered, whose grey eyes seemed to see straight through boardroom presentations and carefully constructed facades. Mr. Boyd. She turned, finding herself mere inches from his broad chest. Even in her Louboutins, she had to tilt her head back to meet his gaze. I didn't expect to see you here. I own the building. His lips quirked into a half-smile that made her stomach flip. Or maybe that was the martinis, and I believe you've had enough." Taraji bristled, drawing herself up to her full height. "I'm celebrating the Richardson account, which you closed brilliantly." His hand hadn't left her elbow, and the heat of his touch seemed to burn through the fabric of her dress. "But I'd hate to see you miss tomorrow's contract signing because of an overzealous celebration." She tried to step back, but the room tilted treacherously. Carson's other hand found her waist, steadying her. The subtle scent of his cologne, something expensive and masculine, filled her senses. Being this close to him felt dangerous, like standing too near a live wire. "Let me take you home," he said softly, his breath warm against her ear. Warning bells clanged in her head, but they were muffled by champagne and the intoxicating rhythm of her heart matching his. "I can call a car." "In this storm." Thunder punctuated his words as if on cue. "I insist." The ride down in the private elevator was silent, charged with something that had nothing to do with the lightning outside. Carson's presence filled the small space, and Taraji found herself hyper-aware of every breath, every slight movement. She caught their reflection in the mirrored walls, she in her black dress, he in a perfectly tailored charcoal suit that made his eyes look like storm clouds. They looked right together, like something out of a magazine spread. His car waited at the curb, a sleek black Bentley with a driver holding an umbrella. Carson guided her into the back seat, his hand on the small of her back sending shivers up her spine that had nothing to do with the rain. The city blurred past the tinted windows, streetlights and neon signs bleeding together like watercolors. Taraji felt herself drifting, her head growing heavy. Without conscious thought, it came to rest against Carson's shoulder. He stiffened for a moment, then relaxed, his arm moving to cradle her more comfortably against him. "Where do you live?" His voice rumbled through his chest. "Tribeca," she murmured. "The Morrison building." She felt rather than saw his surprise. "The penthouse?" Never underestimate a woman who knows her worth." Even half drunk, she couldn't help the pride in her voice. That apartment represented every all-nighter, every sacrifice, every moment she'd proven them wrong. Carson's chuckle vibrated through her. "I never have." The car glided to a stop and suddenly they were in her building's lobby, Carson's arm around her waist as she stumbled slightly on the marble floor. The elevator ride to the penthouse was a blur of his cologne and the steady beat of his heart near her ear. Her keys proved problematic, dancing away from the lock until Carson gently took them from her trembling fingers. The door swung open to reveal her sanctuary, floor-to-ceiling windows showcasing the storm, modern furniture in creams and blacks, art she'd collected from around the world. She took a step forward, and her ankle betrayed her. Carson caught her before she could fall, pulling her against his chest. Time seemed to stop. Lightning flashed, illuminating his face inches from hers. His eyes had darkened to the color of the storm-tossed Hudson, and his breathing had grown ragged. Taraji. Her name on his lips was a prayer and a warning. She didn't think, couldn't think. Her fingers curled into his lapels, and she pulled his mouth down to hers. The kiss exploded between them like a supernova. His lips were soft but demanding, tasting of expensive scotch and unspoken desire. Her body melted into his as his arms tightened around her, one hand tangling in her hair while the other pressed her closer, closer, until she could feel every hard plane of his body against her curves. When they finally broke apart, they were both breathing hard. Rain drummed against the windows, matching the frantic rhythm of her heart. Carson's usually perfect hair was mussed where she'd run her fingers through it, and his eyes burned with an intensity that made her knees weak. "We shouldn't," he whispered, but his hands were already tracing the zipper of her dress. "No," she agreed, working his tie loose. "We really shouldn't." The dress slipped from her shoulders, pooling at her feet like black water. Carson's sharp intake of breath was audible as he took in the sight of her in black lace lingerie. His control, legendary in the boardroom, began to crack. "You are exquisite," he breathed, hands hovering just above her skin, as if he was afraid she'd disappear if he touched her. "Absolutely exquisite." Taraji reached for his shirt buttons, her fingers surprisingly steady now. "Show me." Lightning flashed again as the last barriers between them fell away. Carson's hands and lips mapped every inch of her skin, drawing sighs and gasps that mixed with the thunder. He could hear her heart racing, feel it flutter beneath his lips as he traced the elegant line of her throat. They stumbled toward the bathroom, leaving a trail of expensive clothing in their wake. The vintage clawfoot tub, her one indulgence when renovating, beckoned. Steam rose from the filling tub, fogging the mirrors and creating a dreamlike haze. Carson lifted her as if she weighed nothing, stepping into the hot water with her in his arms. The heat was nothing compared to the fire between them. Water sloshed over the rim as he settled her across his lap, his hands exploring every curve while his mouth claimed hers again and again. Taraji's head fell back as his lips found her pulse point. Everything was sensation, the heat of the water, the cool porcelain at her back, the delicious weight of him against her. Steam curled around them like a cocoon, shutting out the world beyond this moment, beyond this feeling. Their coupling was inevitable as the tide, passionate as the storm still raging outside. Carson whispered her name like a mantra, his voice rough with emotion as they moved together. Taraji's nails left crescents in his shoulders as pleasure built between them, higher and higher until it crashed over them both like a tidal wave. Afterward, they lay entwined in her king-sized bed, the sheets tangled around them. Rain still pattered against the windows, softer now. Carson traced lazy patterns on her bare shoulder, while Taraji listened to his heartbeat gradually slow beneath her cheek. "We should talk about this," he murmured into her hair. "Tomorrow," she replied, already drifting toward sleep. "We'll figure it out tomorrow." As consciousness faded, she felt him press a kiss to her temple. The last thing she remembered was thinking how right it felt to fall asleep in Carson Boyd's arms. She had no way of knowing that tomorrow would change everything, that this night of passion would set in motion events that would shake both their worlds to the core, that the very thing that felt so perfect would soon threaten to destroy them both. But that was tomorrow. Tonight belonged to them, to the storm, to the magic they'd created between them. Tonight, they were just a man and a woman, falling into something deeper than either of them had bargained for. Outside, the storm began to fade, but the one brewing in their hearts was just beginning. Chapter 2. Dangerous Waters. Morning light crept through the floor-to-ceiling windows, painting golden stripes across tangled silk sheets. Taraji stirred, her body deliciously sore in ways that brought memories of the night flooding back. The storm had passed, leaving behind a pristine blue sky and the lingering scent of rain, and Carson's cologne on her pillows. Carson. Her eyes flew open, heart suddenly racing. He lay beside her, one muscular arm draped across her waist, his face peaceful in sleep. The morning light carved shadows beneath his cheekbones, highlighting the slight silver at his temples. He looked younger like this, vulnerable in a way the powerful CEO never allowed himself to be. The events of the previous night played through her mind like a fever dream. The celebration at Eclipse, the storm, the way he'd caught her when she stumbled, that first explosive kiss, and then the bathtub. Heat flooded her cheeks as she remembered how they'd christened nearly every surface between the bathroom and bedroom, how his hands had mapped every inch of her skin as if memorizing her, how he'd whispered her name like a prayer when she'd, "I can hear you thinking." His voice, rough with sleep, sent shivers down her spine. His eyes opened, still heavy-lidded but intense as ever. "Good morning, beautiful." The intimacy of the moment struck her like a physical blow. This wasn't some random hookup. This was Carson Boyd, the man who signed her paychecks, whose family name graced half the buildings in Manhattan, the man who could destroy her career with a single word. This was a mistake. The words tumbled out before she could stop them. His arm tightened around her waist. Was it? She forced herself to sit up, clutching the sheet to her chest, though he'd thoroughly explored every inch it now covered. "We can't do this. You're my boss." "I'm a lot of things." He propped himself up on one elbow, and the sheet slipped dangerously low on his hips. "CEO, your boss, a man who hasn't felt this alive in years." His free hand traced her spine, and she had to bite back a moan. Even now, after everything, his touch set her skin on fire. "Carson, please, we need to think rationally about this." "Rational thought went out the window the moment you kissed me." He sat up fully, the sheet abandoning all pretense of modesty. "Tell me you don't feel this too." Instead of answering, she slipped from the bed, grabbing his discarded dress shirt from the floor and wrapping it around herself. It smelled like him, and the fabric still held his warmth. She padded to the window, watching the city wake far below. "It doesn't matter what I feel." Her voice sounded strange to her own ears. "This can't happen again." She heard him move behind her, felt his presence before his hands settled on her shoulders. His touch was gentle but electric, sending sparks through her nervous system. "Look at me, Taraji." She turned against her better judgment. He stood before her, magnificent in his nudity, all sculpted muscle and quiet power. But it was his eyes that caught her, storm-grey and filled with an emotion she wasn't ready to name. Last night wasn't just sex. His thumbs traced circles on her shoulders. "You felt it too. That connection, that spark. That's what makes it dangerous." She stepped back, needing distance to think clearly. "I've worked too hard to get where I am. I won't be known as the woman who slept her way to the top." Pain flashed across his features. "Is that what you think this is?" "It doesn't matter what I think. It's what everyone else will think." She ran a hand through her tousled hair. "Do you know how hard it is being a black woman in corporate America? Everything I do is scrutinized twice as hard. One mistake, one hint of impropriety, and everything I've built comes crashing down. I would never let that happen. That's exactly my point." She whirled away, pacing the length of the bedroom. "You have that power, the power to protect me, to destroy me. That's not a foundation for whatever this is." Carson caught her mid-pace, his hands cupping her face. The tenderness in his touch nearly undid her. "You're the most brilliant woman I've ever met. You got where you are through sheer talent and determination. Anyone who suggests otherwise will answer to me. And that's supposed to make it better." She pulled away again, but not before seeing the hurt in his eyes. "I don't need your protection, Carson. I need my reputation intact." He raked a hand through his disheveled hair, frustration evident in every line of his body. "So we're just supposed to pretend this never happened? Go back to boardroom meetings and professional distance?" "Yes." The word felt like glass in her throat. "After everything we shared?" He gestured to the bathroom door, still ajar. "After the way you came apart in my arms? After the sounds you made when I—" "Stop!" Her voice cracked. "Please!" He fell silent, watching her with those intense eyes. The air between them crackled with unspoken words and unfulfilled desires. Outside, the city continued its morning routine, oblivious to the drama unfolding 50 stories up. "I should go." He moved to gather his clothes, each movement deliberate and controlled. She watched him dress, remembering how eagerly she'd undressed him just hours before. His usually immaculate suit was wrinkled, his hair still mussed from her fingers. At the bedroom door, he paused. "For what it's worth, I haven't felt this way about anyone in a very long time. Maybe ever." The words hit her like a physical blow. She wrapped his shirt tighter around herself, seeking comfort in his lingering scent. "Carson, I know." A sad smile touched his lips. "It was a mistake, a beautiful, passionate mistake that I'll remember for the rest of my life." He left before she could respond. The sound of her front door closing echoed through the apartment like a gunshot. Taraji's legs gave out, and she sank to the floor, his shirt still wrapped around her like armor. The morning sun continued to paint patterns across her hardwood floors, indifferent to her turmoil. She pressed her hands to her face, feeling the ghost of his touch on her skin. What had she done? Rising on shaky legs, she made her way to the bathroom. The sight of the vintage tub nearly brought her to her knees again. Watermarks still stained the floor where their passion had overflowed its confines. Her reflection in the mirror told its own story. Swollen lips, marks on her neck that her highest collars wouldn't hide, hair wild from his fingers. She looked thoroughly, completely loved. The thought sent her scrambling for her phone. She needed to know more about him, about his family, about what she'd just potentially destroyed. The internet offered its answers readily enough. Carson Boyd wasn't just her CEO, he was Manhattan royalty. The Boyd family owned not just stellar marketing, but a vast media empire that stretched across the globe. And there, buried in the society pages, was a photo of him with a willowy blonde at some charity gala. The caption made her blood run cold. Carson Boyd, with longtime family friend Phoenix DuPont. Sources say wedding bells may be in their future. The phone slipped from her nerveless fingers. She'd slept with her boss. She'd slept with her boss who was practically engaged. She'd slept with her boss who was practically engaged and could destroy her career with a single word. The bathroom suddenly felt too small. She stripped off his shirt, unable to bear its touch any longer. The bathroom suddenly felt too small. She stripped off his shirt, unable to bear its touch any longer. The shower she stepped into was scalding, but it couldn't wash away the memory of his hands, his lips, his whispered words of passion. As she dressed for work, armor-like in a crisp white suit, she tried to convince herself it had just been the alcohol, just the storm and the celebration and too many martinis, just a moment of weakness that would never be repeated. But when she closed her eyes, she could still feel him, still taste him, still hear the way he'd said her name in the darkness. The morning paper lay outside her door, and a headline caught her eye. It was about a decades-old case, something about corporate fraud and wrongful imprisonment. She grabbed it automatically, tucking it into her bag as she headed for the elevator. She had no way of knowing that piece of newsprint would change everything, that the passion she and Carson had shared was only the beginning of a story that would shake both their worlds to the foundation. But for now, she straightened her spine, adjusted her designer bag, and prepared to face the day. She was Taraji Henson, creative director of Stellar Marketing. She'd worked too hard to let one night of passion, no matter how earth-shattering, derail her life. The elevator doors closed on her resolve. But deep inside, where she refused to acknowledge it, her heart whispered that some mistakes were worth making twice. Chapter 3. Family Ties. The Boyd family mansion stood like a crown jewel atop the most exclusive street in Greenwich, Connecticut. Sunday morning sunlight glinted off its limestone facade, warming the meticulously maintained gardens where generations of America's elite had sealed deals and arranged marriages over glasses of champagne. Carson sat in his Bentley, watching the fountain in the circular driveway spray diamonds into the air. 5 days had passed since that night with Taraji. 5 days of seeing her in the office, perfect and professional in her designer suits, acting as if she hadn't moaned his name in the darkness, as if he couldn't still taste her skin, still feel her heartbeat racing beneath his lips. "Sir?" His driver's voice broke through his reverie. "Your grandmother is waiting." Of course she was. Victoria Boyd didn't wait for anyone. People waited for her. He straightened his tie, a habit born from years of her scrutiny, and headed for the grand entrance. The foyer smelled of old money and fresh flowers, massive arrangements that his mother changed weekly to match her mood. Marina Boyd's touch was everywhere, in the updated classical decor, the carefully curated art collection, the subtle show of wealth that spoke of centuries rather than mere decades of privilege. "Carson, darling." Marina emerged from the conservatory, elegant in a pale blue St. John suit that probably cost more than most people's monthly salary. She air-kissed his cheeks, her perfume expensive and subtle. "You're late." Traffic. The lie came easily. He couldn't tell her he'd spent 20 minutes sitting in the driveway, trying to exorcise the memory of Taraji's touch. "Your grandmother is in rare form today." Marina's perfectly painted lips curved in what might have been amusement or warning. "She's been reading the society pages again." Wonderful. Just what he needed after a week of torturing himself with professional distance from the woman who haunted his dreams. He followed his mother through the mansion's grand rooms, each one a testament to the Boyd family's power and prestige. The informal dining room, though there was nothing informal about its 18th-century French furniture and hand-painted ceiling, was already occupied. Victoria Boyd sat at the head of the table like a queen holding court. At 82, she was still a force of nature, her silver hair perfectly coiffed, her posture regal in a way that made everyone else seem like they were slouching. "Carson." Her voice could still make him feel like a schoolboy called to the principal's office. "So kind of you to finally join us." "Good morning, grandmother." He bent to kiss her cheek, catching the familiar scent of Chanel No. 5 that she'd worn his entire life. "Sit." She gestured to the chair at her right hand, his place since his father had moved to the left years ago. "Your sister is running late, as usual." Skylar's coming. That was unusual. His younger sister typically avoided these family brunches like the plague, preferring the company of her fashion world friends to family obligations. "I insisted." Victoria's tone brooked no argument. "We have matters to discuss." The staff began serving brunch, eggs Benedict with caviar, fresh fruit arranged like jewels on bone china, pastries that probably required a small army of French bakers. Carson accepted a cup of coffee, black and strong enough to strip paint. "The Richardson account." Victoria didn't believe in small talk. $50 million, your new creative director's work, I understand. Carson's cup paused halfway to his lips. "Taraji Henson, yes." That single syllable contained volumes. "She's making quite a name for herself. She's brilliant." The words came out more forcefully than he'd intended. "The most talented creative director we've ever had." "So I've heard." Victoria's pale eyes studied him over the rim of her teacup. "Phoenix mentioned she saw you at Eclipse the night of the signing." Of course she had. Phoenix DuPont had been a family friend since childhood, the girl everyone assumed he'd eventually marry. She had a way of seeing exactly what people wanted to hide. "I was there briefly," another lie. "Checking on the celebration." Carson. His father's voice preceded him into the room. James Boyd moved like a shark, all contained power and predatory grace. "You should have called me about the Richardson deal. The media division could have coordinated coverage." "It wasn't necessary." Carson refused to give ground. "Stellar Marketing handles its own PR. We're all one company." James took his seat, accepting a mimosa from a hovering server. "The Boyd media empire requires coordination, son. You know this." The familiar argument hung in the air like sword of Damocles. Carson had fought for years to keep Stellar Marketing separate from his father's media conglomerate, maintaining its independence while other acquisitions were swallowed whole. "James, darling." Marina's voice cut through the tension. "Not at brunch. You know how it upsets my digestion." "Sorry I'm late." Skylar Boyd burst into the room like a fresh breeze, all long legs and artistic chaos in a vintage Dior dress. Traffic was insane. Traffic seems to be a family problem today. Victoria's dry observation made Carson's coffee suddenly taste bitter. Skylar dropped a kiss on their grandmother's cheek before claiming her seat. Did I miss the interrogation about Carson's love life? That's usually the first course at these things. We were just discussing business. James speared a piece of melon with unnecessary force. Boring. Skylar reached for a croissant. Let's talk about the fact that Carson was seen leaving a certain creative director's building at dawn last week. Carson's coffee cup clattered against its saucer. Every head at the table turned toward him with laser focus. Skylar! Marina's voice held a warning. What? The help talks. Skylar shrugged, seemingly oblivious to the bomb she'd just dropped. And Giuseppe is very observant for a doorman. Carson. Victoria set down her teacup with deliberate precision. Is there something you'd like to share with the family? He could feel his father's shark-like gaze, his mother's careful neutrality, Skylar's barely concealed glee. The weight of generations of Boyd expectations pressed down on him like a physical force. Miss Henson and I had a late meeting about the Richardson account. The lie tasted like ashes. I made sure she got home safely in the storm. How chivalrous. James's tone suggested it was anything but. And this had nothing to do with her rather spectacular figure in that Versace dress. James. Marina's shock seemed genuine. We're all thinking it. James picked up his mimosa again. The girl's gorgeous, I'll grant you that. But really, Carson, an employee, have you learned nothing from watching me build this empire? That's enough. Victoria's voice could have frozen hell. Carson knows his responsibilities to this family. Don't you, darling? The question was a trap, and he knew it. Every Sunday brunch was a trap, really. A carefully choreographed dance of power and expectation. He was the heir apparent, the golden boy who would carry the Boyd legacy into the next generation. His personal desires were irrelevant. Of course, grandmother. The words felt like betrayal. Excellent. Victoria smiled, satisfaction evident in every line of her aristocratic face. Now, speaking of responsibilities, Phoenix's mother called me yesterday. The girl is absolutely glowing about your dinner last month. Carson's heart, already heavy, sank further. We had a business dinner, nothing more. Don't be modest. Victoria waved away his protest. She's perfect for you. Old money, impeccable breeding, understands the demands of running an empire. And those DuPont connections could be very useful for the upcoming media merger. I'm not a commodity to be traded. The words escaped before he could stop them. No, you're a Boyd. James's voice was hard, and Boyds understand that everything is business. The rest of brunch passed in a blur of pointed comments and loaded silences. Carson barely tasted the food, his mind constantly drifting to Taraji. How would she handle this shark tank of a family? Probably with the same grace and fire she brought to everything else. As the staff cleared the plates, Victoria gestured for Carson to join her in the conservatory. The room was her personal domain, filled with rare orchids and the ghosts of 1,000 family conspiracies. You're distracted, she settled into her favorite chair, patting the seat beside her. Tell Grandma what's troubling you. For a moment he was tempted. Victoria had always been his confidant, the one person who seemed to see past the Boyd heir to the man beneath, but telling her about Taraji would make it real, would force him to acknowledge the depth of his feelings for a woman he couldn't have. It's nothing. He took the offered seat. Just the pressure of the Richardson account. That knowing syllable again. You know, Your grandfather had a saying about pressure. He said it either crushes you or creates diamonds. The choice is yours. Is that why you're pushing the Phoenix situation? I'm ensuring your future. She reached for his hand, her grip surprisingly strong. This family's future. The media landscape is changing, darling. We need allies, not distractions. The word distraction hung in the air between them. Had Phoenix told her more than she was letting on? Did his grandmother's network of society spies already know about that night with Taraji? I should go. He stood, suddenly needing to escape. Early meeting tomorrow. Carson, Victoria's voice stopped him at the door. Whatever or whoever has caught your attention, remember who you are. Remember what's at stake. He left without responding, the weight of the Boyd legacy heavy on his shoulders. The drive back to Manhattan gave him too much time to think, to remember. Taraji's laugh, her brilliance in meetings, the way she'd felt in his arms. His phone buzzed with a text from Phoenix. Missed you at brunch, dinner this week. He ignored it, just as he'd been ignoring her increasingly frequent messages. Phoenix was the safe choice, the expected choice. The choice that would please his family and secure the Boyd Empire's future. But when he closed his eyes, all he could see was Taraji's face in the morning light, vulnerable and beautiful and absolutely forbidden. The Boyd family mansion disappeared in his rearview mirror, but its shadow followed him all the way back to the city, back to tomorrow's boardroom meeting where he'd have to pretend his heart didn't race every time Taraji spoke. Back to the carefully constructed walls between them that felt more like prison bars with each passing day. He was Carson Boyd, heir to an empire, and empires, his father had always taught him, were built on sacrifice. The question was, what exactly was he willing to sacrifice, and for whom? Chapter 4. Shadows of the Past. The newspaper clipping had turned yellow with age, its edges crumbling like autumn leaves. Taraji spread it carefully on her desk, the late afternoon sun streaming through her office windows at Stellar Marketing. The headlines screamed across decades. Media mogul's testimony sends former employee to prison. Her fingers trembled as she read the article again. Though she'd memorized every word since finding it in her father's belongings, James Boyd, current patriarch of the Boyd Empire, had testified against Marcus Henson in a case of corporate fraud. Her father, the man who'd raised her alone, working multiple jobs after his release, never breathing a word about the family that had destroyed his life. The door to her office opened without a knock. Only one person dared to do that. Carson Boyd strode in, and her heart performed its usual gymnastics routine at the sight of him. 2 weeks had passed since their night together, but her body hadn't gotten the message that it was over. The art department needs your approval on the Richardson campaign visuals, he said, then stopped short at the look on her face. What's wrong? She quickly folded the newspaper, but not before he caught a glimpse of his father's younger face in the grainy photo. Nothing. Just researching some company history. He moved closer, and the air between them crackled with familiar electricity. Taraji, if something's bothering you, don't. She stood, kneading the desk between them. We agreed to keep things professional. Did we? His voice dropped to that dangerous register that made her knees weak. I remember you deciding that. I don't remember agreeing. The setting sun painted his sharp features in gold and shadow, reminding her of how he'd looked in the dawn light after their night together. She forced the memory away. Your father testified against mine in court. Did you know that? The words fell between them like bombs. Carson's face went blank with shock. What? 20 years ago? She thrust the article at him. James Boyd's testimony sent my father to prison for 3 years. 3 years of my childhood without him. All because your father needed a scapegoat for his own corporate fraud." Carson scanned the article, his face growing darker with each line. "I was in college when this happened. I had no idea." "Of course not." Bitterness crept into her voice. "Why would the Boyd heir need to know about one destroyed life among many? Just collateral damage in building your precious empire. Is that what you think?" He looked up, his grey eyes stormy. "That I'm just like him? Just another corporate shark destroying lives for profit? I don't know what to think anymore." She ran her hands through her hair, disturbing its perfect styling. "Was that night? Was it some kind of sick revenge? Did you know who I was?" He moved so fast she barely saw it, coming around the desk to grasp her shoulders. "Listen to me. I had no idea about any of this. That night happened because I couldn't stay away from you any longer, because you drive me crazy with wanting you." His touch burned through her silk blouse, and her treacherous body swayed toward him. "Carson, tell me you don't feel it too." His thumbs traced circles on her shoulders, just like that morning in her apartment. "Tell me you don't think about that night every time we're in the same room." She couldn't lie. Not about this, not with his scent surrounding her and his touch setting her nerve endings on fire. "It doesn't change anything. Your family destroyed mine. I'm not my father." His hands slid up to cup her face. "And you're not just Marcus Henson's daughter. We're our own people, Taraji." "Are we?" She pulled away, though it felt like tearing off her own skin. "You're the Boyd heir. The whole world knows you're practically engaged to Phoenix DuPont." A muscle ticked in his jaw. "Phoenix and I grew up together. Everyone assumed we'd end up together, but there's nothing between us. The society pages say different." She retrieved another clipping from her desk drawer, the photo of him and Phoenix at the charity gala. "You look cozy." "That's not—" He broke off as her office door opened again. "Carson, darling." Phoenix DuPont swept in like a blonde hurricane in designer clothes. She stopped short at the tension in the room. "Oh, am I interrupting something?" Taraji stepped back, professional mask sliding into place. "Not at all. Mr. Boyd and I were just discussing the Richardson campaign." Phoenix's perfectly shaped eyebrows rose slightly. "Of course you were." She turned to Carson, running a manicured hand down his arm. "Ready for dinner. The reservation at Le Bernardin is for 8. Carson's eyes never left Taraji's face. "I have work to finish here." "All work and no play." Phoenix pouted prettily. "You promised me dinner after standing me up last week." The implications hung in the air. Last week, when he'd been in Taraji's bed instead of at dinner with his supposed future wife. Taraji gathered her things, unable to watch this display. "The art department needs those approvals," she said coolly. "I'll have them on your desk first thing tomorrow, Mr. Boyd." She fled before either could respond, her heels clicking a desperate rhythm on the marble floors. The elevator was mercifully empty, allowing her to lean against its mirrored wall and try to steady her breathing. The familiar ding announced her arrival in the lobby, but as the doors opened, she caught a glimpse of her reflection. Her carefully applied lipstick was slightly smudged. From when? Had she unconsciously been biting her lip while Carson stood so close? Had Phoenix noticed? The night air hit her like a slap, and she gulped it gratefully. Her town car waited at the curb, but she waved it away. She needed to walk, needed to think. Manhattan at night was its own kind of magic, but tonight it felt oppressive. Every building seemed to bear the Boyd name. Every billboard screamed their power. How had she not seen it before? The web she'd unwittingly walked into, the trap she'd sprung the moment she'd kissed Carson Boyd. Her phone buzzed, a text from her father. "Coming to dinner Sunday. Made your favorite gumbo." Tears pricked her eyes. Marcus Henson had rebuilt his life from nothing after prison, had given her everything he could. He'd never told her about the Boyds. never poisoned her mind with bitterness. He'd just worked harder, loved harder, made sure she had every opportunity he'd lost. And how had she repaid him? By falling into bed with the son of the man who'd destroyed their lives. She was so lost in thought that she didn't notice the town car following her until it pulled up alongside. The window rolled down to reveal Phoenix's perfect face. "Get in!" It wasn't a request. "We need to talk." Everything in Taraji screamed to keep walking, but curiosity won out. She slid into the leather interior, noting that it was the same model as Carson's car. Of course it was. "Let's be clear." Phoenix's voice could have frozen champagne. "Carson and I have an understanding. Our families have an understanding. Whatever little game you're playing with him ends now." Taraji's spine stiffened. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Please!" Phoenix laughed, but it wasn't a happy sound. "I saw how he looked at you in there, the same way he's been looking at you since that night at Eclipse. I have sources everywhere, darling. I know he spent the night. That was a mistake." The words tasted like ash. Of course it was. Phoenix's smile was razor-sharp. "And it won't happen again. Carson needs someone who understands his world, his responsibilities, someone who can help him run the empire, not someone whose father tried to destroy it." The hit landed exactly as intended. "You know about that?" "I know everything about you, Taraji Henson. The scholarship to Harvard, the meteoric rise through the advertising world, the father who spent 3 years in prison for trying to expose Boyd Media's creative accounting." Phoenix's perfectly manicured nails drummed on her designer clutch. "You're talented, I'll give you that. But you're not one of us. You never will be." "I don't want to be." Taraji reached for the door handle. "And you don't know me at all." "I know Carson." Phoenix's voice stopped her. "I know what he needs, even if he doesn't. Walk away now while you still have a career, before history repeats itself." The threat hung in the air between them. Taraji stepped out onto the sidewalk, her legs surprisingly steady. Through the tinted window, Phoenix's voice drifted out one last time. "Oh, and Taraji, that lipstick shade doesn't suit you. Too desperate." The car pulled away, leaving Taraji alone with the ghosts of the past and the impossible yearnings of the present. Her phone buzzed again. "Carson this time. We need to talk about what you found. About everything. Please." She stared at the message until the screen went dark. Up and down the street, the Boyd Empire's buildings stretched toward the stars, their windows like watching eyes. Somewhere in one of them, Carson was probably having dinner with Phoenix, playing his part in the dynasty. And somewhere in Brooklyn, her father was making gumbo, probably humming old jazz tunes, like he always did when he cooked. 2 worlds, separated by more than just a river. The choice should have been simple. But as she flagged down a taxi, all she could think about was the way Carson's hands had felt on her skin, the way his voice dropped when he said her name, the way he looked at her like she was the only woman in the world. "Where to?" the driver asked. She gave her address, then leaned back in the seat, closing her eyes. The newspaper article felt heavy in her bag, a weight of history and hurt and things left unsaid. But heavier still was the memory of Carson's touch, the echo of his words. "I'm not my father." The taxi wound through the city streets, carrying her home to her empty apartment where the ghost of that passionate night still lingered. Tomorrow she would face him across the boardroom table, maintaining professional distance while her heart tried to beat its way out of her chest. But tonight she would allow herself to remember, to feel, to wonder about paths not taken and choices not yet made. And in his penthouse office, Carson Boyd stared out at the city his family had helped build, a glass of scotch untouched in his hand, thinking of a woman who made him question everything he'd ever been taught about power, legacy, and love. Chapter 5. Corporate Games. The boardroom buzzed with nervous energy as Stellar Marketing's executive team assembled for the announcement. Taraji sat at her usual place, 2 seats down from the head of the table, her expression carefully neutral despite the chaos in her heart. 3 weeks had passed since she'd discovered the truth about her father's imprisonment. 3 weeks of avoiding Carson's texts and calls, of maintaining rigid professionalism in meetings. He entered the room like a force of nature, commanding attention without effort. The charcoal suit he wore was clearly bespoke, highlighting his broad shoulders and athletic build. Their eyes met for a fraction of a second before she looked away, but that brief contact was enough to send electricity racing through her veins. "Good morning." Carson's voice filled the room as he took his seat. "I'm sure you're all wondering why I called this emergency meeting." Taraji's fingers tightened around her pen as a familiar blonde figure glided into the room. Phoenix DuPont wore a white Chanel suit that probably cost more than most people's monthly salary, her presence as unexpected as a shark in a swimming pool. "As of 9 o'clock this morning," Carson continued, "Boyd Media Group has announced its intention to fully integrate Stellar Marketing into its corporate structure. Miss DuPont will be overseeing the transition team." The room erupted in murmurs. Stella had always operated independently, despite being owned by the Boyd family. Full integration meant changes, massive changes. "This is an exciting opportunity," Phoenix purred, taking a seat beside Carson. Her hand brushed his arm possessively. "We'll be streamlining operations, maximizing synergy between divisions." "Streamlining usually means layoffs," Taraji found herself saying. All eyes turned to her, including Carson's storm-grey gaze. "Will there be a redundancy review?" Phoenix's smile could have cut glass. "Naturally, we'll be evaluating all positions for efficiency, starting with the creative department." The threat couldn't have been clearer if she'd painted it on the wall. Taraji met her gaze steadily, refusing to be intimidated. "The Richardson campaign numbers speak for themselves. Our creative team is the best in the industry." Numbers can be deceiving. Phoenix's perfectly manicured fingers tapped against the polished table. "Just ask your father." The room went deadly silent. Taraji felt the blood drain from her face as every executive present turned to stare at her. Carson's chair scraped back as he stood abruptly. "That's enough." His voice cut through the tension like a blade. "Phoenix, a word. Now." He practically dragged her from the room, leaving behind a wake of whispered conversations and speculative glances. Taraji gathered her things with trembling hands, ignoring the pitying looks from her colleagues. She needed air, needed to think, needed to be anywhere but here. The elevator doors were closing when a strong hand stopped them. Carson stepped in, his face like thunder. They rode in charged silence until he hit the emergency stop button, turning to face her in the confined space. "I didn't know she would be there." He ran a hand through his perfectly styled hair. "I didn't know about any of it until this morning. My father blindsided me." "It doesn't matter." Taraji's voice sounded strange to her own ears. It was naive to think Stella could stay independent forever. "Look at me." When she didn't, his fingers caught her chin, gently forcing her gaze to his. "I won't let her hurt you. I won't let anyone hurt you." The touch of his fingers on her skin sent sparks through her entire body. "Carson, please, we can't." His lips crashed into hers before she could finish the sentence. The kiss was desperate, hungry, full of all the words they couldn't say. Her bag dropped forgotten to the floor as her hands fisted in his jacket, pulling him closer. He pressed her against the elevator wall, his body hard and familiar against hers. "I miss you," he breathed against her mouth. "God, I miss you so much it's driving me crazy." She should push him away, should maintain professional distance, should remember who he was, who she was, all the reasons this could never work. Instead, She kissed him harder, pouring weeks of longing and frustration into the contact. His hands slid down her sides, mapping her curves through her silk blouse. Even through the fabric, his touch burned. She could feel his heart hammering against her palms, matching the frantic rhythm of her own. The elevator jerked back to life, forcing them apart. They stared at each other, both breathing hard, as the car resumed its descent. Carson's normally perfect hair was mussed, where she'd run her fingers through it. Her lipstick stained his collar. "My office," he said roughly. 5 minutes. The doors opened on the lobby and she fled without responding. In the bathroom, she stared at her reflection, swollen lips, flushed cheeks, eyes bright with barely contained desire. She looked exactly like what she was, a woman on fire for a man she couldn't have. 5 minutes passed, then 10. She should go back to her office, should pretend none of this had happened. Instead, her feet carried her to the executive floor, to the massive corner office where Carson Boyd commanded his piece of the family empire. He was waiting for her, jacket discarded, sleeves rolled up to reveal strong forearms. The sight made her mouth go dry. "Lock the door!" She did, the click of the lock echoing in the charged silence. They moved toward each other like magnets, like celestial bodies caught in each other's gravity. This kiss was slower, deeper, but no less desperate. "We shouldn't," she whispered against his mouth, even as her fingers worked at his tie. "I know." He pulled back just far enough to look into her eyes. "Tell me to stop. Tell me you don't want this as much as I do." She couldn't. Not when his touch set her blood on fire, not when every cell in her body screamed for him. His hands found the buttons of her blouse, undoing them with agonizing slowness. Each inch of exposed skin received its own kiss, its own caress, until she was trembling with need. The blouse fell away, revealing black lace that made his breath catch. "You're so beautiful." His voice was reverent as he traced the edge of her bra. So incredibly beautiful. Her own hands weren't idle, pushing his shirt from his shoulders, needing to feel his skin against hers. He was gorgeous, all hard muscle and smooth skin, a Greek god in an executive's clothing. She pressed her lips to his chest, feeling his heart racing beneath. They made it to the leather couch somehow, leaving a trail of clothing in their wake. Carson laid her down with infinite care, his eyes dark with desire as he took in the sight of her. "You drive me crazy," he murmured, trailing kisses down her throat. "I can't think straight when you're near me. Can't focus on anything but how much I want you." Her response was lost in a gasp as his mouth found more sensitive areas. He took his time, rediscovering every spot that made her moan, until she was arching beneath him, desperate for more. When they finally came together, it was like coming home. Like finding a piece of herself she hadn't known was missing. He whispered her name like a prayer, and she answered with sighs and gasps that spoke volumes more than words. Afterward, they lay tangled together on the couch, her head on his chest, his fingers tracing patterns on her bare shoulder. Reality began to creep back in, bringing with it all the complications they'd temporarily forgotten. "Phoenix will destroy me for this." Taraji's voice was barely a whisper. "I won't let her." His arms tightened around her. "I don't want her, Taraji. I never have. It's you. It's been you since the moment you walked into that first meeting and called my marketing strategy outdated." She had to smile at the memory, even as her heart ached. "Your father will never accept this. The Boyd heir and the daughter of the man he sent to prison, it's like something out of a Shakespeare tragedy. Then we'll write our own story." He tilted her face up to his. "I'm tired of living by their rules, of sacrificing what I want for what they expect. Help me fight this merger. Help me keep Stella independent." "And then what?" She sat up, reaching for her scattered clothing. "We ride off into the sunset while your family disowns you and mine disowns me. If that's what it takes." The sincerity in his voice made her pause. "I love you, Taraji. I think I've loved you since that night in the storm. Everything else, the money, the power, the family name, none of it matters without you." The words hit her like a physical blow. Love. The one thing they'd carefully avoided naming, the emotion too dangerous to acknowledge. A knock at the door shattered the moment. "Carson?" Phoenix's voice carried through the wood. "Your father's on the line about the merger announcement." They dressed in frantic silence, straightening clothing and hair as best they could. Taraji slipped out through the private entrance while Carson answered the door, her heart pounding with more than just the thrill of almost being caught. He loved her. Carson Boyd, heir to an empire, loved her. The knowledge followed her back to her office, where a manila envelope waited on her desk. Inside was a USB drive and a note in elegant handwriting. "Before you choose your side in this war, you should know what really happened to your father. V." Victoria Boyd's initials were unmistakable. Taraji's hands shook as she plugged in the drive. What she found would change everything. Chapter 6. Hidden Truths. The USB drive hummed to life in Taraji's laptop, its contents spreading across her screen like poison. Financial records, court documents, surveillance photos, 20 years of secrets laid bare in cold digital clarity. Her hands trembled as she scrolled through the evidence of a conspiracy that went far deeper than she'd imagined. It wasn't just her father who'd been framed. There had been others, whistleblowers and honest employees who'd discovered the truth about Boyd Media's criminal activities. James Boyd hadn't just silenced them. He'd destroyed them systematically, using his media empire to smear their names while his lawyers buried them in legal fees. The penthouse's floor-to-ceiling windows reflected her troubled expression as night fell over Manhattan. She'd been reading for hours, each revelation hitting her like a physical blow. Her father had been trying to expose an international money laundering operation when James Boyd had turned the tables, painting him as the criminal instead. Her phone buzzed. Carson again. The seventh call since their encounter in his office. She let it go to voicemail, her mind still reeling from Victoria's USB drive. How much did Carson know? Was he part of it all, playing her just as his father had played others? The knock at her door startled her so badly she nearly dropped her wine glass. Through the security camera, she saw Skylar Boyd's distinctive profile. "I know you're in there," Skylar called out, "and I know what my grandmother gave you. Let me in, Taraji, please." Against her better judgment, Taraji opened the door. Skylar swept in wearing vintage Valentino and an expression of determination. "Before you say anything," Skylar held up a hand. "Yes, I know about the USB drive. And no, Carson doesn't know what's on it. Not yet." Taraji's fingers clenched around her wine glass. "Why are you here?" "Because I love my brother." Skylar moved to the window, her reflection overlaying the city lights. "And because I've watched him come alive since he met you in a way I haven't seen in years. Your father destroyed my family." "Our father," Skylar corrected, "destroys everything he touches. But Carson isn't him. Victoria knows that. It's why she gave you those files." The pieces clicked into place. "She's testing me." "Smart girl." Skylar turned, her expression serious. "The question is, what are you going to do with what you know?" Before Taraji could answer, her phone buzzed again. This time, it was a text from Phoenix. "My office. Now or tomorrow, everyone knows about your father's criminal past." "Ignore her," Skylar said, reading the message over Taraji's shoulder. "Phoenix is desperate. The merger isn't going as smoothly as she planned. I have to go." Taraji grabbed her coat. "She'll follow through on that threat." "Then let me come with you." Skylar's eyes flashed. It's time someone put that silver spoon socialite in her place. The Boyd Media building lobby was deserted at this hour, their heels clicking on marble in perfect synchronization. Phoenix's office was on the 42nd floor. Prime real estate for the woman who thought she'd be the next Boyd matriarch. She was waiting behind her desk, perfect in cream Chanel, even at this late hour. Her smile was a weapon. "I said alone, darling. I go where I want." Skylar dropped onto a leather sofa. "Besides, I wouldn't miss this for the world." Phoenix's perfectly manicured fingers drummed on her desk. "Fine. Taraji, darling, let's talk about your options. They're rather limited, I'm afraid." "Are they?" Taraji kept her voice steady. "Because from where I stand, I'm not the one with secrets to protect." "Oh, but you are." Phoenix's smile widened. "Your father's conviction may have been orchestrated, but the evidence James planted was very convincing. One call to the right reporter, and your perfect reputation becomes rather tarnished." "You really want to play this game?" Skylar sat forward. "Because I have some interesting photos of you from our Dartmouth days that would definitely interest the board." "Stay out of this, Skylar." Phoenix's composure cracked slightly. "This is between me and the woman trying to steal my fiancé." "He was never yours to steal." Carson's voice cut through the tension like a blade. He stood in the doorway, tie loosened, hair disheveled as if he'd been running his hands through it. His eyes found Taraji's immediately, and the connection between them was almost physical. "Carson." Phoenix's voice turned honey-sweet. "I was just having a girl chat with your employee. I heard everything." He stepped into the office, power radiating from every movement. "The threats, the blackmail, it stops now." "You don't understand what's at stake." Phoenix rose, desperation creeping into her voice. "Your father is a criminal." Carson's words fell like bombs in the quiet office. "I know everything, Phoenix, about the money laundering, about the false testimonies, about how he used you to spy on me." Taraji's heart stopped. "What?" "Victoria showed me her own copy of the files an hour ago." His eyes never left Taraji's face. "I've spent the last 2 hours on the phone with federal prosecutors. It's over, all of it." Phoenix sank back into her chair, her perfect facade crumbling. "He'll destroy you for this. You'll lose everything." "No." Skylar stood, moving to her brother's side. "He'll lose everything. We have proof, Phoenix. Real proof, not the manufactured kind James specializes in." "Get out." Carson's voice was steel. "If you ever threaten Taraji again, if you ever come near her or her father, I'll make sure every society page in the country knows exactly what you did at Dartmouth." Phoenix fled, leaving behind only the lingering scent of expensive perfume and defeated ambition. The silence that followed was deafening. "Why didn't you tell me," Taraji finally asked, "about the investigation? I couldn't risk it getting back to my father." He moved toward her, each step careful as if approaching a wild animal. "And then Victoria showed me the files, and I realized you already knew. That's why you've been avoiding me." "I thought," her voice caught, "I thought maybe you were part of it, that maybe everything between us was just another Boyd family manipulation." "Never." His hands found her face, thumbs brushing away tears she hadn't realized were falling. "Everything I feel for you is real, more real than anything in my life." Skylar cleared her throat. "And that's my cue to leave. Try not to have sex on Phoenix's desk. God knows what diseases lurk there." The door clicked shut behind her, leaving them alone in the luxurious office. Carson's thumbs were still tracing patterns on Taraji's cheeks, his touch setting her skin on fire. "I'm sorry," he whispered, "for all of it. For what my father did to yours. For not seeing it sooner. For letting you doubt us for even a moment." She pressed her forehead to his chest, breathing in his familiar scent. "What happens now?" "Now?" His fingers threaded through her hair. "Now I turn over everything to the feds. James Boyd's empire falls, and I spend the rest of my life making up for my family's sins. You'll lose everything. She pulled back to look at him. The company, the wealth, your family's legacy. I don't care. His eyes burned with intensity. None of it matters without you. I love you, Taraji Henson. The rest is just details. The kiss was inevitable, passionate and healing all at once. His hands tangled in her hair as hers clutched his shoulders, pulling him closer. They came together like storms colliding, like worlds aligning, like pieces of a puzzle finally finding their match. His mouth traced the column of her throat, drawing gasps that echoed in the quiet office. Her fingers made quick work of his tie, needing to feel his skin against hers. Each button revealed more of him, more places to touch and taste and claim. We shouldn't, she breathed, even as her body arched into his touch. Not here. Then let me take you home. His voice was rough with desire. Let me show you exactly how real this is. The ride to his penthouse was torture, every red light an eternity of wanting. His hand on her thigh burned through her silk dress, promising things that made her pulse race. The elevator ride was worse, his kisses desperate and hungry, leaving her weak-kneed and wanting. Inside his apartment they came together like forces of nature. Clothing fell away under urgent hands, each revealed inch of skin, worshipped with lips and tongues, and whispered words of devotion. He laid her on his bed like she was precious, like she was everything he'd ever wanted. "You're so beautiful," he breathed, watching her arch beneath his touch. So incredibly, perfectly beautiful. Their lovemaking was different this time, slower, deeper, full of all the words they hadn't said. He took his time learning every spot that made her gasp, every touch that made her tremble. She mapped his body with equal devotion, memorizing the sounds he made when she touched him just right. Afterward they lay tangled in his sheets, her head on his chest, his fingers tracing patterns on her bare shoulder. The city glittered beyond his windows, but neither of them noticed. "What are you thinking?" he asked softly. "That I love you too." The words felt right, felt true, in a way nothing else had. That whatever comes next, we face it together. His arms tightened around her. Together. They fell asleep like that, wrapped in each other and the promise of tomorrow. Outside, Manhattan continued its endless dance of light and shadow, unaware that in a penthouse high above its streets, two people had found something rare and precious, a love strong enough to overcome the sins of the past and build a future of their own making. But in the darkness of his home office, Carson's phone buzzed with a message from Victoria. "It's not over. James knows. Be careful." The storm was coming, but this time they would weather it together. Chapter 7. Dangerous Revelations. The brake lines had been cut. Taraji stared at the fluid pooling beneath her Mercedes, her heart pounding against her ribs. If Carson hadn't insisted on having his security team check her car every morning, she would have driven straight off the parking garage's 6th floor. "Miss Henson." Marcus, the head of security, touched her elbow gently. "Mr. Boyd wants you in his office. Now." The elevator ride felt endless. Her hands wouldn't stop shaking, even though she'd tucked them into the pockets of her Burberry coat. Someone had tried to kill her. Someone had actually tried to kill her. Carson was pacing his office like a caged tiger when she arrived. The moment he saw her, he crossed the room in 3 long strides and pulled her into his arms. She melted against him, breathing in his familiar scent, letting his strength steady her. "If anything had happened to you..." His voice was rough with emotion. "I've doubled your security detail. You're not going anywhere without protection." It was him, wasn't it? She pulled back just enough to look into his eyes. "Your father?" "James doesn't make idle threats." He cupped her face in his hands. "The federal investigation is getting too close. He's desperate. I won't let him intimidate me." But even as she said it, another tremor ran through her body. No. Carson's eyes darkened with determination. We won't let him intimidate us. His kiss was fierce, protective, full of all the fear and anger he couldn't express in words. She responded with equal passion, needing to feel alive, to feel safe in his arms. His hands tangled in her hair as hers clutched at his shoulders, pulling him closer. A throat cleared from the doorway. They broke apart to find Skylar watching them with a mixture of amusement and concern. "As hot as this is," she said, "we have bigger problems. Phoenix just called a press conference. She's claiming she's pregnant with Carson's baby." The words hit Taraji like a physical blow. She stepped back from Carson, her mind spinning. "What? It's impossible." Carson's voice was hard. "We haven't been together in over a year, and even then it was one drunken kiss at a charity gala." "Truth doesn't matter." Skylar moved to the window, watching the gathering media circus below. "She's playing right into James's hands. The scandal will overshadow any investigation." The perfect distraction. Taraji's legs felt weak. "And it makes me look like the other woman trying to break up a family." "You're not going anywhere." Carson reached for her, but she stepped back again. "I need air." She turned toward the door. I need to think." She made it to the private elevator before he caught up with her. His hand caught her wrist, spinning her to face him. The look in his eyes took her breath away. Desperation, determination, and something deeper that made her heart race. "Don't run from me." His voice was barely a whisper. "Not now. Not after everything." "Carson." She couldn't finish the thought because his mouth was on hers again, hungry and demanding. Her back hit the elevator wall as he pressed against her, his body hard and familiar. The doors slid shut, giving them a moment of privacy in the suspended glass box. His hands found the buttons of her silk blouse, revealing inch after inch of skin that his lips immediately claimed. She gasped as he found that sensitive spot beneath her ear, her fingers clutching his shoulders for support. "I love you," he breathed against her throat. "Only you. Always you." The elevator dinged, forcing them apart. They stood breathing heavily, staring at each other as the doors opened onto the private garage level. His normally perfect hair was mussed where she'd run her fingers through it. Her blouse was half unbuttoned, revealing the black lace beneath. "Come home with me," he said roughly. "Let me prove how much you mean to me." A throat cleared again. This time it was Marcus, looking studiously at his shoes. "Sir, Miss Henson's car has been replaced with a secure vehicle, but there's something else you need to see." They followed him to a sleek black SUV, where Victoria Boyd waited, elegant as ever in Chanel tweed. Her expression was grave. "Get in," she commanded. "Both of you. What I have to tell you can't be overheard." The car's interior was like a mobile office, complete with privacy screens and sound dampening. Victoria waited until they were moving before speaking. 20 years ago, she began, I made a terrible mistake. I chose to believe my son over my conscience. I watched him destroy good people, including your father, Taraji, and I did nothing." Taraji's hand found Carson's, squeezing tight. Victoria continued, her voice heavy with regret. "But I've been gathering evidence. Years of documentation, witness statements, proof of everything James has done. I was waiting for the right moment, for someone strong enough to stand against him." She handed Carson a thick envelope. "This goes beyond money laundering. There's murder, blackmail, corruption at the highest levels. Phoenix isn't really pregnant. She's being blackmailed. James has something on her family, something devastating enough to make her play along. Why now?" Taraji's voice was barely a whisper. "Why tell us this?" Victoria's pale eyes fixed on their joined hands. "Because I see how my grandson looks at you, the same way his grandfather looked at me, before ambition and greed destroyed him. I won't watch another generation of Boyds lose their soul to power. A phone buzzed. Carson's private line. The caller ID showed his father's name. "Put it on speaker," Victoria commanded. James Boyd's voice filled the car, smooth as aged scotch and twice as dangerous. "I trust you got my message this morning? The brake lines were just a warning, son. There are so many accidents that can happen to ambitious young women in New York. Touch her again," Carson's voice was deadly quiet, "and I'll destroy you myself." "You?" James laughed. "The soft son who cares more about advertising campaigns than real power? You're nothing without me, boy. Nothing without the Boyd name." "No, James," Victoria's voice cut through the car like a blade. "He's everything you never were, a man of integrity, of true strength, and you've just threatened my future granddaughter-in-law on a recorded line." Silence filled the car. Then, "Mother, I should have known you'd choose the wrong side. The only wrong side was yours." Victoria's spine was steel. "The evidence is already with the FBI. It's over, James. Your empire falls today." The call ended abruptly. Carson pulled Taraji closer, pressing a kiss to her temple. "Are you okay? Granddaughter-in-law?" She managed a shaky laugh. "Someone's getting ahead of themselves." "Oh, please." Victoria waved a hand. "I saw it the moment you walked into your first board meeting. You remind me of myself at your age, brilliant, fearless, unwilling to let men define your worth. But you're stronger than I was, strong enough to help Carson rebuild something better from the ashes of his father's sins." The car stopped outside Carson's penthouse. Victoria's expression softened as she looked at them. "Go up," she said. "Stay safe. I'll handle the press conference in Phoenix. By morning, the world will know the truth about James Boyd." In the private elevator, Carson pulled Taraji into his arms again. This time their kiss was slower, deeper, full of promises and possibilities. "Marry me," he whispered against her lips. She pulled back, startled. "What?" "Marry me." His eyes burned with intensity. "Not because my grandmother assumed, not because of the scandal or the danger. Marry me because I love you more than anything in this world, because you make me want to be better, to build something worthy of you." Tears spilled down her cheeks. "Carson, say yes." His thumbs brushed away her tears. "Say you'll build a new legacy with me, one based on truth and love instead of power and fear." The elevator doors opened onto his penthouse, but neither of them moved. In that suspended moment, Taraji looked at the man before her, the man who'd chosen love over empire, truth over power, her over everything he'd been raised to value. "Yes," she whispered, and felt his heart jump beneath her palms. "Yes, I'll marry you." His kiss was joyful, passionate, full of promise for their future. They stumbled into the penthouse, leaving a trail of clothing in their wake. His hands and lips mapped every inch of her skin, as if memorizing her, worshipping her, claiming her as his own. Later, tangled in his sheets, her head on his chest and his fingers tracing patterns on her bare shoulder, they watched the city lights flicker beyond the windows. Tomorrow would bring chaos. Press conferences and federal investigations, family drama and corporate upheaval. But tonight belonged to them, to love, to truth, to the future they would build together from the ashes of the past. Carson's phone buzzed one last time, a text from Skylar. "Phoenix confessed everything. James is on the run. You two better name your first daughter after me." They laughed together, safe in their bubble of happiness. Outside, Manhattan glittered like scattered diamonds, promising a new day, a new beginning, a new legacy of love instead of power. And in the darkness, Taraji whispered, "I love you," and felt his heart soar beneath her cheek. The storm had passed, their love had survived, and the future beckoned, bright with possibility. Chapter 8. Distance makes the heart grow. Fonda. London rain was different from New York rain. It fell in a steady, melancholic drizzle that matched Taraji's mood as she stared out the window of her temporary office in Mayfair. 3 weeks had passed since she'd fled New York, since the media storm had exploded around James Boyd's crimes and Phoenix's lies. 3 weeks without Carson's touch, without his voice in her ear, without his presence making everything right in her world. The engagement ring on her finger caught the grey London light, sending prismatic reflections dancing across her desk. She hadn't taken it off, even though their parting had been complicated. "You're doing it again." Skylar's voice cut through her reverie. Carson's sister had arrived yesterday, supposedly for Fashion Week, but Taraji knew better. Staring at rain and sighing like a heartbroken heroine in a Gothic novel. "I thought you were meeting with Burberry today." Taraji turned from the window, taking in Skylar's perfectly curated vintage outfit. "Already done. They're desperate to have me design a collection." Skylar dropped gracefully onto the office's leather sofa. "But we need to talk about why you really ran away to London." "I didn't run away." The protest sounded weak, even to her own ears. Stella's London office needed restructuring after everything with James came out. "Bullshit." Skylar's expression was uncommonly serious. "You ran because you're scared, because Carson loves you so much it terrifies you." The truth of the words hit like a physical blow. Taraji sank into her chair, the weight of unsaid things pressing down on her chest. "He proposed in the middle of a crisis," she said softly, "while his father was threatening my life, while his ex was claiming to be pregnant with his child. How can I trust that it was real and not just reactive?" "Oh, honey." Skylar moved to perch on her desk. "Carson's been in love with you since the day you called his marketing strategy outdated in that first meeting. The crisis just made him stop pretending he could live without you." Taraji's fingers traced the ring's delicate band. "And now? Now my idiot brother is making himself miserable in New York, buried in depositions against our father, pretending he's giving you space when all he wants is to fly here and beg you to come home." "I saw the news." Taraji pulled up a browser window showing the latest headlines. James Boyd had been arrested in Singapore, trying to access hidden accounts. The Boyd media empire was in chaos, its stock price plummeting as more revelations emerged. "Carson's handling it." Skylar's voice held pride. "He's restructuring everything, making it legitimate. Victoria's helping, calling in favors from every society maven and business titan she knows. But he needs you, Taraji. He needs your strength, your brilliance, your love." "I need to show you something." Taraji opened her desk drawer, pulling out a manila envelope. This arrived yesterday. Inside were photos, surveillance shots of her and Carson together. At dinner, in his car, entering his building. Their most intimate moments turned into weapons by James Boyd's private investigators. "These mean nothing now." Skylar pushed them away. "James is in custody. Phoenix admitted to everything. It's over." "Is it?" Taraji stood, pacing the luxurious office. "Every time I close my eyes, I see those cut brake lines. Every time my phone rings, I expect more threats. I love him so much it physically hurts, Skylar, but I'm terrified that loving him will destroy us both. That's exactly what James wants." Skylar caught her arms, forcing her to stop pacing. "He wants you afraid, wants you separated from Carson, wants to control you both even from a jail cell." Before Taraji could respond, her phone buzzed. Her heart stopped at the caller ID. "Carson!" "Answer it," Skylar commanded, "or I swear I'll answer it for you." With trembling fingers, Taraji accepted the call. Carson's voice, rough with emotion and distance, filled her ear. "I miss you." No preamble, no small talk, just raw honesty that made her knees weak. "I miss you so much I can barely breathe." "Carson." Tears spilled down her cheeks. "No, let me finish." His voice caught. "I know you're scared. I know my father hurt you, threatened you, tried to destroy everything we have. But running away isn't the answer. Running away just means he wins. I'm not running. But even as she said it, she knew it was a lie. Then come home. The vulnerability in his voice broke her heart. Come home to me. Let me prove that what we have is stronger than his hatred, stronger than your fear, stronger than anything they can throw at us. Skylar quietly left the office, closing the door behind her. Taraji sank onto the sofa, clutching the phone like a lifeline. I see you everywhere, Carson continued. In every room of this empty penthouse. I smell your perfume on the pillows. I reach for you in my sleep. I can't do this without you, Taraji. I don't want to. The memories flooded back, his hands on her skin, his lips on her throat, the way he looked at her like she was everything he'd ever wanted, the safety she felt in his arms, the completeness, the absolute rightness of being with him. I'm scared, she whispered. I know, but we're stronger together. Come home, and we'll face everything together. The media, the company restructure, my father's trial, all of it. Just come home. I have meetings. Her protest was weak. Cancel them. I'll send the jet. Be at Heathrow in 3 hours. Her heart raced. Carson. 3 hours. His voice softened. I love you, Taraji Henson. Come home and let me spend the rest of my life proving it. The call ended, leaving her trembling with emotion. Skylar poked her head back in. Well, are you finally going to stop being an idiot and go back to my brother? Taraji looked around the London office, at the rain-streaked windows, and the life she'd been trying to build away from him. Away from their love, away from everything that made her feel truly alive. Help me pack. Skylar's squeal of delight probably shattered windows in Mayfair. 3 hours later, Taraji settled into the Boyd private jet's luxury cabin. Her phone buzzed with a text from Carson. I'll be waiting at Teterboro. I love you. The words blurred through her tears as the jet took off into the grey London sky. She was going home. Home to his arms, his love, his strength. Home to face whatever came next, together. Skylar, curled up in the opposite seat with a fashion magazine, smiled knowingly. He probably hasn't slept in weeks. Or eaten properly. He's absolutely useless without you, you know? I know. Taraji touched her engagement ring. I'm useless without him too. The flight passed in a blur of anxiety and anticipation. Every mile brought her closer to him, closer to everything she'd been running from. But this time, she wasn't running away. This time, she was running toward something, toward love, toward truth, toward the future they would build together. The New York skyline appeared through the clouds, familiar and beautiful and home. Her heart raced as the jet began its descent. She'd left in fear and confusion. She was returning in strength and certainty. As the wheels touched down at Teterboro, she saw him waiting on the tarmac. Even from this distance, she could see the tension in his shoulders, the way he couldn't stand still. The moment the door opened, she was moving. They came together like magnets, like storm fronts colliding, like pieces of a whole finally reuniting. His arms wrapped around her as hers wound around his neck, and suddenly she could breathe again. Everything that had been wrong in her world righted itself in the space of a heartbeat. Never again, he breathed into her hair. Never leave me again. Never, she promised, breathing in his familiar scent. I'm home now. I'm home. His kiss was desperate, hungry, full of weeks of longing and fear and love. She melted into him, not caring that Skylar was probably rolling her eyes or that the flight crew was trying not to stare. Nothing mattered except this, his hands in her hair, his heart beating against hers, the absolute rightness of being in his arms. Take me home, she whispered against his mouth. The ride to his penthouse was torture of the sweetest kind. Every red light was an opportunity for kisses that left them both breathless. His hands couldn't stay still, touching her face, her hands, her thigh, as if reassuring himself she was really there. Inside the penthouse, they came together with desperate need. Clothing fell away under urgent hands as they relearned each other's bodies. He laid her on their bed, and it was theirs now, had been since that first night. Like she was precious, like she was everything. "I love you," he breathed against her skin. "God, I love you so much." Later, tangled in sheets and afterglow, she traced the shadows under his eyes. "I'm sorry I ran. No more apologies." He caught her hand, pressing a kiss to her palm. "We're together now. Everything else is just details." Outside, New York City glittered in the darkness, familiar and beautiful and home. Tomorrow would bring challenges, media attention, corporate restructuring, family drama. But tonight was theirs. Tonight was for reunion, for healing, for coming home to each other's arms where they both belonged. And in the darkness, Taraji finally let go of her fear. Let herself believe in the future they would build together. Let herself trust in the love that had brought her home. Chapter 9. Reconciliation in the Rain. London's rain-slicked streets reflected the city lights like scattered diamonds as Carson's car wound through Mayfair. The Boyd family's London townhouse loomed ahead, its Georgian facade a testament to generations of power and privilege. But Carson barely noticed the architectural grandeur. His eyes were fixed on the light in a third-floor window where he knew Taraji was working late. 3 weeks without her had been torture, 3 weeks of empty beds and hollow victories as he'd restructured the company in the wake of his father's arrest. 3 weeks of loving her from an ocean away, respecting her need for space while his heart screamed for her. "Sir!" His driver's voice broke through his reverie. "We've arrived." Carson stepped out into the drizzle, not bothering with an umbrella. The townhouse's security system recognized him instantly, allowing him access to the private elevator. His heart pounded harder with each floor he ascended. The elevator opened directly into Taraji's temporary office suite. She stood at the window, silhouetted against the city lights, more beautiful than his memory had managed to capture. At the sound of his arrival, she turned. "Carson." Her voice was barely a whisper. "What are you doing here?" "I couldn't stay away." He crossed the room in long strides. "I tried. God knows I tried to give you the space you needed, but I can't sleep, can't think, can't breathe without you." She backed away, bumping into her desk. "You shouldn't have come. The media—" "To hell with the media." His hands found her face, thumbs brushing her cheekbones. "To hell with everything except us." The kiss was inevitable, passionate, full of weeks of longing and unspoken words. She melted into him with a soft sound that made his blood burn, her fingers clutching his rain-dampened jacket. He tasted salt on her lips and realized she was crying. "Don't cry," he breathed against her mouth. "Please don't cry. I missed you so much." Her voice broke on the words. "Every day, every hour, every minute, but I was so scared." "Of what?" He pulled back just enough to look into her eyes. "Of me? Of us? Of losing you?" She pressed her forehead to his chest, breathing in his familiar scent. "Of loving you so much that losing you would destroy me." "Never." He tilted her face up to his. "You'll never lose me. I love you, Taraji Henson, more than empire, more than legacy, more than life itself." This time when he kissed her, it was slower, deeper, full of promises and possibilities. Her hands slid inside his jacket, seeking his warmth, his strength, his steadfast heart beating for her. His fingers tangled in her hair, freeing it from its professional updo until it fell in waves around her shoulders. "Come home," he whispered against her lips. "Come home to me." "Carson." She arched into his touch as his mouth found that sensitive spot beneath her ear. "The company is fine." He traced kisses down her throat. "Victoria's handling everything. Skylar's keeping the board in line. But I need you. Need your strength, your brilliance, your love. Their reflection in the window caught his eye. Her wrapped in his arms, the city lights creating a halo around them. She was wearing one of her power suits, a cream Valentino that made her skin glow like burnished gold. The sight of her in his arms again made his heart stutter. "I was so angry with my father," she said softly, "not just for what he did to my father, but for making me doubt this, doubt us. He can't hurt us anymore." Carson's hands slid down her sides, mapping her curves through the expensive fabric. "He's facing federal charges. Phoenix testified against him. It's over." "Is it?" She pulled back slightly. The media's still camped outside Stella's offices. Everyone's waiting for the Boyd Empire to implode. "Let them wait," he began, slowly unbuttoning her suit jacket. "We'll build something better from the ashes. Something based on truth and love instead of lies and power." The jacket fell away, revealing a silk camisole that made his mouth go dry. Her skin glowed in the city light, warm and perfect beneath his hands. She shivered as his fingers traced her collarbone. "I love you," she breathed, and the words were both surrender and victory. "God help me, I love you so much." They came together again, passion blazing between them like lightning. His tie joined her jacket on the floor as their kisses grew more desperate. She pushed his suit jacket from his shoulders, needing to feel his strength beneath her hands. "Not here," she gasped as his lips found her throat again. "The security cameras are already disabled." He smiled against her skin. "I had Skylar's help arranging this surprise." Her laugh turned to a moan as his hands found bare skin beneath her camisole. "Of course you did." The massive desk proved the perfect height as he lifted her onto it. Papers scattered, but neither of them cared. All that mattered was touch, taste, the desperate need to reconnect after weeks apart. Her legs wrapped around his waist as his mouth claimed hers again and again. "I need you," he breathed against her lips. "Need to feel you, taste you, love you." "Then take me home." She pulled back, eyes dark with desire. "Take me where we can properly make up for lost time." The private jet waited at Heathrow, but the 40-minute drive felt like an eternity. They couldn't keep their hands off each other in the back of the Bentley, every red light an opportunity for kisses that left them breathless. "I had the penthouse redecorated," he said between kisses. "Everything you ever mentioned liking. The vintage clawfoot tub you saw in that magazine. The hand-painted silk wallpaper from Paris. You did all that while I was gone. I needed to feel close to you somehow." His honesty made her heart ache. Needed to create a home worthy of you. The flight home was torture of the sweetest kind. Even in the luxury of the private jet, they couldn't properly reunite. Too many eyes, too many protocols. But their touches lingered, their gazes locked, their hearts beating in perfect synchronization. New York greeted them with its own kind of rain. Harder, faster, more urgent than London's gentle drizzle. The city welcomed them home with a storm that matched the passion in their hearts. Inside the penthouse they came together like forces of nature. Clothing fell away under desperate hands as they relearned each other's bodies. Every touch was electric, every kiss a homecoming, every caress a promise of forever. He laid her on their bed, and it was theirs now, had always been theirs, like she was precious, like she was everything. The storm raged outside their windows as they moved together, finding that perfect rhythm they'd been missing for weeks. "Never leave again," he breathed against her skin. "Never doubt us again." "Never," she promised, arching beneath his touch. "I'm yours, always yours." Later, tangled in sheets and satisfaction, they watched lightning paint the sky outside their windows. His fingers traced lazy patterns on her bare shoulder as she listened to his heartbeat beneath her cheek. "Marry me," he said softly. She lifted her head to look at him. "You already asked me that. I already said yes." "I know." He caught her left hand, kissing the ring he'd never asked for back. "But I want to ask you again, now that the crisis is over, now that you've chosen to come home, marry me, Taraji Henson. Build a new legacy with me." Tears spilled down her cheeks as she smiled. "Yes, 1,000 times. Yes." The kiss that followed was soft, sweet, full of promise for their future. Outside, the storm began to fade, leaving behind a city washed clean, ready for new beginnings, ready for their love story to write its next chapter. Tomorrow would bring challenges, press conferences and board meetings, family drama and corporate restructuring. But tonight belonged to them, to love, to truth, to the future they would build together. And in the darkness, wrapped in each other's arms, they were finally completely home. Chapter 10. The Fall of an Empire. The Metropolitan Museum's Grand Hall glittered with 1,000 lights, the annual autumn gala in full swing. New York's elite moved through the space like exotic birds, draped in designer gowns and family jewels. Taraji stood at the top of the marble staircase, feeling the weight of every eye in the room. Her gown was a masterpiece, black Zuhair Murad that made her dark skin glow like burnished gold. Diamonds from the Boyd family vault adorned her throat and ears, Victoria's pointed message to society about where she stood. The engagement ring on her finger caught the light, sending prismatic reflections dancing across the marble. "You're stunning." Carson's voice in her ear made her shiver. He looked devastating in his tuxedo, every inch the powerful CEO. "Ready to face the lions. With you." She threaded her fingers through his. "I'm ready for anything." They descended the stairs together, a united front against the whispers and stares. The gala was their first public appearance since the scandal broke, since James Boyd's arrest and Phoenix's confession. Every media outlet in the city had fought for coverage rights. Victoria Boyd held court near the champagne fountain, resplendent in vintage Dior and generations of family jewels. Her smile when she saw them was genuine, a rare sight in these halls of power. "Darlings." She kissed their cheeks, marking them as hers before all of society. "You look perfect together." "Mother." Marina Boyd's voice cut through the pleasant moment. She wore Chanel and an expression of barely concealed desperation. "We need to discuss the seating arrangements. James's place at the family table will remain empty." Victoria's tone could have frozen champagne. "As will yours if you continue to support him." Carson's hand tightened on Taraji's waist as his mother's face crumpled. "Marina," he said softly, "it's time to choose. Your husband's crimes are exposed. Don't go down with him." "He's your father." Marina's voice shook. "Everything he did for this family." "No." Taraji couldn't stay silent. "He did it for power, for control. He destroyed lives, including my father's, to build his empire on lies." The arrival of Skylar, dramatic in vintage Alexander McQueen, prevented Marina's response. "Phoenix is here," she announced without preamble, "and she's drunk." Carson tensed beside Taraji. "Where?" "Heading this way." Skylar positioned herself between them and the approaching blonde, with press in tow. Phoenix DuPont had traded her usual sophisticated style for something more desperate, a dress too tight, too revealing, too obvious in its attempt to reclaim attention. Her makeup couldn't quite hide the shadows under her eyes. "Carson," her voice carried across the marble floor. "We need to talk about the baby." The nearby conversations hushed. Cameras appeared like magic as reporters sensed a story. Carson stepped forward, but Taraji caught his arm. "No," she said softly. "Let me." She approached Phoenix with the confidence of a woman who knew her worth. "There is no baby, Phoenix. The hospital records proved that weeks ago." "You don't understand," Phoenix swayed slightly. "James made me do it. He had evidence about my father's companies, about the offshore accounts." "We know." Taraji's voice was gentle. "Victoria found everything. You're not the only victim of James Boyd's manipulation." Phoenix's perfect facade cracked. Tears spilled down her cheeks, ruining her careful makeup. "I'm so sorry," she whispered. "I never wanted. He said he'd destroy my family." The cameras were going crazy, capturing every moment of the confession. Taraji did the last thing anyone expected. She hugged Phoenix. "It's over," she said softly. "He can't hurt any of us anymore." The moment was shattered by a commotion at the entrance. James Boyd, out on bail and clearly drunk, stormed into the gala with security in pursuit. "You ungrateful bastards!" His voice boomed through the grand space. "Everything I built, everything I sacrificed, and this is how you repay me?" Carson moved to shield Taraji, but she stepped forward instead. This was her moment, her chance to face the demon who'd haunted both their families. "You built nothing," she said clearly. "You stole and lied and destroyed lives to create an empire of paper. And now it falls. You." James's face contorted with rage. "The daughter of that self-righteous fool who thought he could expose me. You seduced my son, turned him against his own blood. That's enough." Carson's voice cut through the chaos like a blade. "Security, remove my father, and make sure the DA knows he violated his bail conditions. You're nothing without me." James struggled as security grabbed his arms. "Nothing without the Boyd name." "No, father." Carson's arm wrapped around Taraji's waist. "I'm everything you never were. A man who chose love over power, truth over empire. And I've never been prouder to disappoint you." The guards dragged James away, his shouts fading into the stunned silence. Victoria stepped forward, commanding attention without effort. "Ladies and gentlemen," her voice carried to every corner of the room, "you've just witnessed the end of an era, but also the beginning of a new one. Boyd Media Group, under the leadership of my grandson Carson and his brilliant fiancée Taraji Henson, will be transformed, built on truth, on integrity, on the values that should have guided us all along." She raised her champagne glass. "To the future, to love, to doing better than those who came before us." The crowd responded automatically, raising their glasses in toast. Marina stood frozen for a moment before something in her seemed to break. She crossed to Carson and Taraji, tears in her eyes. "I choose you," she whispered. "My son, my future daughter, I choose love." The moment was perfect. Family healing, truth prevailing, love conquering all, until Taraji saw the red dot of a laser sight dancing across Carson's chest. She moved without thinking, pushing him aside as the shot rang out. Pain bloomed in her shoulder as security tackled them both to the ground. Screams filled the grand hall as guests fled in panic. "Taraji!" Carson's voice was frantic as he cradled her. "Someone call an ambulance." "I'm okay." The pain was distant, shock setting in. "Just a graze. Carson, I'm okay." "James's last loyal man." Victoria's voice was grim as security reported the shooter's capture. His private investigator, trying one last time to protect his employer's secrets. The next hours passed in a blur of ambulances and hospital rooms, police statements and worried family. The bullet had indeed just grazed her shoulder, requiring only minor surgery to clean and close the wound. Carson never left her side, his face tight with worry and love. When they were finally alone in her private room, he gathered her carefully into his arms. "You could have died," he whispered into her hair, "taking a bullet meant for me. I love you." She pressed closer, ignoring the twinge in her shoulder. "I'll always protect you, just like you protect me." His kiss was gentle but full of passion, full of gratitude for her safety and promises for their future. When he pulled back, his eyes were suspiciously bright. "Marry me," he said. "Not next month, not next week, tomorrow. I don't want to wait another day to make you mine forever." She laughed softly. "I'm pretty sure the hospital won't release me tomorrow." "Then, the day after." He kissed her again. "The moment you're cleared. Just us, our families, our closest friends. No society circus, no media frenzy. Just love." "Yes." She curled into his warmth, feeling safe and cherished and completely at home. The day after tomorrow. Outside her hospital room, New York continued its endless dance of light and shadow. James Boyd sat in a holding cell, his empire crumbling, his legacy in ashes. But from those ashes, something beautiful was rising. A love story strong enough to overcome hatred, truth powerful enough to shatter lies, and a future bright with promise. Carson held Taraji close, listening to her breathing even out as she drifted to sleep. Tomorrow would bring press conferences and police interviews, family drama and corporate restructuring. But tonight was theirs. Tonight was for healing, for loving, for believing in the power of truth and the strength of hearts that choose love over empire, every single time. Chapter 11. Love Conquers All. The Boyd family mansion's gardens bloomed with late autumn roses, their fragrance mixing with morning mist as Taraji walked the winding paths. Her shoulder had healed well in the 2 weeks since the shooting, though Carson still watched her like a hawk for any sign of discomfort. She found him in the conservatory, deep in conversation with her father. The sight still amazed her. Marcus Henson, officially exonerated and compensated for his wrongful imprisonment, discussing business strategy with the man who would soon be his son-in-law. "The restructuring plan is solid," Marcus was saying, his deep voice carrying the authority of hard-won wisdom. "But the European markets need a gentler approach. That's why I want you to handle it." Carson's response made both Taraji and her father freeze. "Boyd Media Europe needs leadership that understands both business and ethics, someone who can rebuild trust." Marcus sat back, studying the younger man. "You want to give control of your European division to the man your father framed?" "I want to give it to the man who never lost his integrity, even when it cost him everything." Carson's eyes found Taraji in the doorway. "The man who raised an extraordinary daughter to be even stronger than he is." She moved to them, drawn by the love and pride in Carson's gaze. He pulled her onto his lap automatically, careful of her healing shoulder. The simple intimacy of the gesture made her heart flutter. "What do you say, Dad?" She smiled at her father. "Ready to show Europe how business should be done?" Marcus's laugh was rich and warm. "Look at you two, tag-teaming me. When's the wedding again?" "Tomorrow." Carson pressed a kiss to Taraji's temple. Not soon enough. They'd kept it small, intimate, immediate family and closest friends only. No media, no society circus, no Boyd family politics. Victoria had surprisingly supported their decision, understanding their need for privacy after everything that had happened. "Speaking of tomorrow," Skylar's voice preceded her into the conservatory, "we need to steal the bride for her final fitting." Taraji started to rise, but Carson's arms tightened around her. 5 more minutes." "No minutes." Skylar grabbed Taraji's hand, pulling her up. "Marina's already at the atelier with the designers, and you know how she gets when kept waiting." The transformation in Carson's mother had been remarkable. Free from James's influence, Marina Boyd had bloomed like the roses in her garden. She'd thrown herself into wedding preparations with unexpected enthusiasm, determined to make up for years of following her husband's cruel agenda. "Go." Carson stole a quick kiss. "I'll see you tonight at the rehearsal dinner." "No, you won't." Skylar smirked. Traditional night before separation, remember? Next time you see her, she'll be walking down the aisle. The reminder made his eyes darken with emotion. He pulled Taraji back for one more kiss, this one deeper, full of promise for their future. "I love you," he breathed against her lips. "I love you too." She touched his face gently. "Try not to reorganize any multinational corporations while I'm gone." His laugh followed them out of the conservatory. Skylar led the way to the waiting car, where Phoenix sat nervously in the back seat. The sight no longer brought pain or anger. Phoenix's testimony had been crucial in James's prosecution, and her genuine remorse had led to an unexpected friendship. She'd asked to be part of the wedding preparations as a way to make amends. "The dress is perfect," Phoenix said as they pulled away from the mansion. "Wait until you see the final alterations." The atelier was a scene of controlled chaos. Marina directed an army of seamstresses, while Victoria observed from her favorite chair, offering occasional commentary. The dress hung like a dream, in white silk and handmade lace. "There's my beautiful bride." Marina kissed Taraji's cheeks. "Come, let's make sure everything is perfect." The next hours passed in a blur of fittings and adjustments, champagne and laughter. Taraji watched these women who had become her family, Marina with her newfound warmth, Victoria with her quiet strength, Skylar with her boundless energy, Phoenix with her determined redemption. "I have something for you." Victoria beckoned her over once she was back in her regular clothes. "A gift, though perhaps that's not quite the right word." She handed Taraji a leather portfolio. Inside were documents, transfer of ownership papers for significant portions of Boyd Media Group. "I don't understand." Taraji looked up in confusion. "You will be equal partners," Victoria said firmly. "You and Carson, building something new together. No more patriarchal empire building, no more choosing power over love." Tears pricked Taraji's eyes. "Victoria, you took a bullet for my grandson." The older woman's voice caught. "You chose love over fear, truth over power. You're exactly what this family needs, what Carson needs. This is my way of ensuring the future I should have fought for years ago." The documents blurred as Taraji began to cry in earnest. Marina wrapped her in a gentle hug, while Skylar pressed a fresh glass of champagne into her hand. "Welcome to the family, darling," Marina whispered. "Properly, officially, equally." The day passed in a whirlwind of final preparations. By the time Taraji returned to her penthouse, her last night there before moving in with Carson permanently, she was emotionally and physically exhausted. Her phone buzzed with a text from Carson, "Missing you already, I love you." She smiled, typing back, "One more night, then forever." A knock at her door surprised her. She opened it to find her father holding 2 cups of coffee and a familiar expression of love and pride. "Thought you might need this." He handed her a cup, "and maybe some father-daughter time before tomorrow." They settled on her balcony, watching the city lights twinkle like stars. The autumn air was crisp but not cold, perfect for their tradition of late-night talks. "I never thought I'd say this," Marcus began, "but Carson Boyd is nothing like his father. The way he looks at you, that's real love, baby girl. The kind that changes worlds." "I know." She leaned her head on her father's shoulder. "I'm sorry it took me so long to trust it." "You needed time to heal. We both did." He kissed her hair. "But love won in the end. Real love always does." They talked late into the night, about the past and future, about healing and hope, about the power of choosing love over fear. When Marcus finally left, Taraji stood at her window, looking out at the city that had seen her highest highs and lowest lows. Tomorrow she would marry Carson Boyd. Not because he was rich or powerful, not because of family expectations or social pressure, but because they loved each other with a force strong enough to reshape worlds. Her phone buzzed one last time. Carson again. I can see your lights are still on. Go to sleep, my love. Dream of me. Dream of tomorrow. Dream of forever. She touched the screen gently, heart full of love and certainty. Forever starts tomorrow. I love you. Outside, New York glittered like a promise. In his own penthouse, Carson stood at his window, probably looking toward her lights just as she looked toward his. Tomorrow would bind them together officially, but their hearts had been bound since that first storm-swept night. Taraji changed for bed, her wedding dress hanging like a dream in its garment bag. Everything was ready. The intimate ceremony in the mansion's rose garden, the small reception, their honeymoon departure to a private island where they could just be themselves. As she drifted to sleep, she smiled, feeling the rightness of everything settling into her bones. Love had won, truth had prevailed, and tomorrow would begin the rest of their lives, together. Chapter 12. Full Circle. The Boyd Mansion's rose garden had never looked more beautiful. Autumn sunlight filtered through the changing leaves, casting golden light on the intimate gathering. White roses and burgundy dahlias created a natural cathedral, their petals occasionally drifting down like nature's confetti. Taraji stood in Victoria's private suite, examining her reflection in the antique mirror. Her wedding dress was a masterpiece of silk and hand-beaded lace, combining classic elegance with modern sophistication. The something old was a diamond-encrusted hair clip from Victoria's personal collection. Something new was the dress itself. Something borrowed was Marina's pearl bracelet. Something blue was a sapphire anklet from Skylar. "You look like a dream." Her father's voice made her turn. Marcus Henson stood in the doorway, handsome in his tuxedo, eyes bright with unshed tears. "My beautiful, brilliant girl." "Daddy!" She reached for him, careful not to wrinkle the dress. "Carson's already in the garden." Marcus wrapped her in a gentle hug. "That boy looks like he might pass out from happiness. You sure about this? Not too late to run away to Paris?" She laughed, the sound full of joy and certainty. "I've never been more sure of anything." The garden path was lined with candles in crystal hurricanes, their flames dancing in the autumn breeze. As the string quartet began playing, Taraji took her father's arm, her heart racing with anticipation. The moment she saw Carson, everything else faded away. He stood beneath an arch of roses, devastatingly handsome in his tuxedo, his eyes fixed on her with such love it nearly brought her to her knees. The 50 steps to reach him felt like an eternity and a heartbeat all at once. Victoria, officiating the ceremony, smiled as Marcus placed Taraji's hand in Carson's. Their vows were personal, honest, full of promises forged in the fire of everything they'd overcome. "Taraji," Carson's voice was rough with emotion. "From that first night in the storm, you've been my heart, my home, my truth. You make me want to be better, to build something worthy of your love. I promise to spend every day showing you that choosing love over fear was the right decision. That choosing us over empire was the only choice that mattered." Tears spilled down her cheeks as she spoke her own vows. "Carson, you saw me, really saw me, from the beginning. Not as an employee or a conquest, but as an equal, a partner, someone worth fighting for. I promise to be your strength when you need it, your peace when you're troubled, your home when the world is too much. I choose you today and every day above all else." Their kiss was sweet, tender, full of promise for their future. Rose petals drifted around them as their families applauded, the moment perfect in its intimacy. The reception was held in the mansion's conservatory, transformed into a magical garden of lights and flowers. Marina had outdone herself with the details, from the hand-painted place cards to the vintage champagne Carson's grandfather had laid down for just such an occasion. "A toast," Victoria raised her glass, commanding attention without effort. To love that overcomes all obstacles, to truth that shatters lies, to a future built on integrity instead of power. As evening fell, Carson led Taraji away from the celebration. "I have a surprise for you." The car waited at the front drive, not the usual Bentley, but a classic Aston Martin convertible. "Where are we going?" His smile was mysterious as he helped her in, careful of her dress. "Back to the beginning." Eclipse looked different in the autumn twilight, its rooftop garden glowing with thousands of tiny lights. The same bartender from that fateful night greeted them with champagne. "You planned this." Taraji's heart swelled with love as she recognized the exact spot where they'd first connected. "I wanted to show you how far we've come." Carson pulled her close, swaying gently to the soft music. "That night, I thought I was just helping a brilliant employee get home safely. Instead, I found my soulmate." She pressed closer, breathing in his familiar scent. "Did you know then that this was special? The moment you looked at me with those fierce, beautiful eyes and insisted you were perfectly fine while swaying on your Louboutins." His laugh rumbled through his chest. "I was done for." Their kiss was passionate, full of memories and promises. The city stretched out below them, a glittering witness to their love story. When they finally broke apart, Carson's eyes were dark with desire. "Mrs. Boyd," he murmured against her lips, "shall we continue this celebration somewhere more private?" The penthouse, their penthouse now, welcomed them home. Rose petals created a path to their bedroom, where more candles cast intimate shadows. Carson's hands trembled slightly as he began unfastening her dress. "I love you," he breathed against her skin. "God, I love you so much." The dress fell away like water, revealing silk and lace beneath. His sharp intake of breath made her smile. Even after everything, she could still take his breath away. His tuxedo joined her dress on the floor as they came together with passionate tenderness. Their lovemaking was different this time, deeper, richer, full of the knowledge that this was forever. Every touch was a promise, every kiss a vow, every whispered word a declaration of eternal love. Later, wrapped in silk sheets in each other, they watched the city lights twinkle beyond their windows. Carson's fingers traced lazy patterns on her bare shoulder while she listened to his heart beat beneath her cheek. "Happy?" he asked softly. "Completely." She pressed a kiss to his chest. "Though I still can't believe Phoenix caught my bouquet." His laugh vibrated through her. Skylar's face was priceless, though not as priceless as when your father asked her to dinner next week. They'd be good together. Taraji smiled at the thought. Both of them deserve happiness. Speaking of happiness, Carson shifted to look at her properly. "Victoria gave me some interesting news at the reception. Apparently we're going to need a nursery sooner rather than later." Taraji sat up, clutching the sheet to her chest. "What?" His smile was radiant as he placed a hand on her still, flat stomach. "She claims she's never wrong about these things. Something about a grandmother's intuition." Joy exploded through her chest as she realized he was right. She was late, had been too busy with wedding preparations to notice. They came together in a kiss that tasted of happy tears and future dreams. "A baby," she whispered against his lips. "Our baby. A new generation." He cradled her face in his hands, born from love instead of obligation, raised with truth instead of manipulation, the start of a new legacy. Outside, autumn wind carried the last rose petals from the garden, making room for new growth, new beginnings. In their bed, Carson and Taraji Boyd held each other close, their hearts beating in perfect synchronization, their love strong enough to overcome any obstacle. The Boyd Empire had fallen, but from its ashes something beautiful had risen. A love story powerful enough to break generational curses, heal ancient wounds, and create a future bright with promise. As they drifted to sleep, tangled together in silk sheets and satisfaction, the city continued its endless dance of light and shadow. But in their penthouse high above it all, love had won. Truth had prevailed, and their story was just beginning. Victoria Boyd stood in her garden, watching the last wedding guests depart. She smiled as she touched a perfect white rose, thinking of the great-grandchild already growing beneath Taraji's heart. The Boyd legacy would continue, but not as an empire of fear and power. Instead, it would be an empire of love, of truth, of second chances and happy endings, just as it always should have been. And in their penthouse, Carson and Taraji Boyd slept peacefully in each other's arms, their love strong enough to reshape worlds, their future bright with endless possibilities. Their story had come full circle, ending where it began, with a storm, with passion, with two hearts finding their perfect match. But this was not truly an ending. It was just the beginning.